Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the AI for Good Global Summit, all year, always online. My name is Ksenia Fontaine from the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, and I have the privilege of introducing today's session on human collaboration with an AI musician, organized in partnership with the Monash Data Futures Institute, Goldsmiths, and State. Now, the ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, and we are also the organizers of the AI for Good Global Summit alongside X Prize Foundation and in partnership with 36 UN sister agencies, ACM, and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of the summit is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. Like the most of the world, the AI for Good Summit has gone digital, with a weekly programming allowing us to reach even more people across the globe. And before I introduce today's moderator, I would like to run over some housekeeping rules. If you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A tab. The moderator will select and read out the questions to the audience, and we are particularly counting on your participation to create a very engaging discussion. And speaking about interactive, I have the first challenge for you. Could you please let us know where you are calling from, which country or which city? Simply use the chat function and make sure to send your message to all panelists and attendees. And let me do this first. So I'll write down that I'm calling from Geneva. So let me see. So we have the audience from Sweden, London, Netherlands, Barcelona, Paris, Cyprus. Wow, it's going very fast. Australia, Kenya, Germany, Stockholm. Welcome everyone, such an international audience. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Christian Rausch, the founder and the managing director of the State Studio in Berlin. Christian, welcome, and the show is all yours.
Thank you very much, Ksenia, and welcome to today's AI for Good session on AI and creativity. Welcome from State Studio, a Berlin-based gallery focusing on showing works at the intersection of art and technology, where scientists and artists collaborate together to push the limits of what's humanly possible and make sense of it. Technology is changing our lives in an ever-increasing pace, and particularly artificial intelligence has come a long way as arguably the leading transformative technology to offer us completely new opportunities in fields ranging from health to mobility and arts and culture. With so much at hand to explore, understand, and experiment with, it should come as no surprise that over the past several years, AI art has been flourishing around the world and grown into a relevant artistic discipline on its own right, followed by worldwide media attention. You might want to think about a few examples only, like the 2018 highly discussed sale of an art piece for nearly $500,000 at an auction in New York, or the stunning works of AI artist Refik Anadol, for example, at the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. Or you might have even witnessed yourself some AI artworks, for example, the performances of Rip Swan and Mio Leclerc at the AI for Good Global Summit in 2019. So recently, many prominent musicians have also started to work with artificial intelligence to push the limits of their creative expression and explore the new possibilities offered by the technology. In recent years, many fascinating results have been achieved with AI, generating own music. A lot of it has been around the direction of imitating music, imitating the musical style of particular genres or artists, for example, Bach or Beatles songs that have been recreated in a new style. So a little bit computers becoming creative in their own right, and by that juxtaposing the human and computer creativity, bringing up the topic of the value and meaning of autonomously created computer art. At the same time, a lot of effort has been invested into trying to make AI more accessible and even more connectable to human creativity, opening new ways and new modes for true human-computer collaboration. Improvisation playing together as a group of musicians without a predetermined plan surely is the highest mode of collaborative interaction in music. It's the most creatively challenging and rewarding thing that humans can do together in music. It takes not only a lot of skills, but a lot of empathy, trust, and intuition. When it works, it's almost magical, but achieving a good collective improvisation is very, very difficult, even for the best musician. So the question of today is, what happens when one of the improvising musicians is actually an artificial intelligence? So what is happening today? What we will see today is the result of a unique and fascinating collaboration between researchers and musicians from Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and Goldsmiths University of London in the UK. They will showcase their research and discuss ideas behind the design of AI systems that inspire and support human creativity instead of replacing it. We will see the world premiere of a film recording of a music live performance and improvisation separated by over 10,000 miles, improvising together with the help of an artificial intelligence musician specializing in live improvisation. The film is about 35 minutes long. During the film, we want to very much encourage you to send your thoughts and questions to the chat, because after the film, we will follow with a Q&A featuring the musicians and researchers, where you will get the chance to have some of your questions from the chat answered. And now, with no further ado, it's my greatest pleasure to introduce to you one of the core initiators behind this collaboration, John McCormack. John is a professor of computer science at Monash University. He's the founder and director of SensiLab. He's not only a world-renowned AI researcher, but also a world-famous artist on his own right, and has been for over more than 2 decades at the forefront of exploring the creative potential of technology. John, the floor is yours. Welcome very much.
Thanks so much, Christian, and hello everyone. It's great to be here. As Christian said, I'm the director of SensiLab at Monash University in Melbourne, and we're a brand new creative technologies research laboratory that tries to explore the undiscovered potentials of technology and culture. And so we're going to be talking today about how musicians can collaborate effectively with artificial intelligence technologies. And together with my colleagues from Monash and Goldsmiths in London, we're really excited to present some of our research on human AI improvisation and show you how we collaborate and perform with AI technologies. So you'll meet the other members of our group in a moment. But first, I'd like to just say a few words quickly about our university and the Data Science Institute that we're representing. So Monash University is Australia's largest university and arguably the only truly global university in Australia, with campuses in China, Italy, Indonesia, and Malaysia, in addition to our major presence in Australia. And within Monash's Faculty of Information Technology, which I'm and my colleagues are a part of, it's the largest AI and data science group in the Asia Pacific region. And together with this group and the group that I lead, SensiLab, we tackle some of the biggest and most pressing issues in creative AI and beyond. So the research collaboration that we'll be presenting today is between Monash and Goldsmiths. And I'd also like to acknowledge that this event has been made possible through the Monash Data Futures Institute and its mission to promote AI for social good. And we represent the entire Monash University AI and data science ecosystem, which is a very diverse and multidisciplinary group of researchers and students throughout the university. So today we're really going to be talking about music and musicians and the possible roles that AI can play in shaping the future of music. So many of us who are presenting today are artists and musicians. So we are both the end users as well as the developers of the technologies that we're developing. And we strongly believe in creating new technologies that empower people, that challenge and expand human creative possibilities, whatever a person's level of musical proficiency or their access to technology. So we're promoting a research agenda that recognises the human significance of music as our first and foremost priority, an agenda that we think fits really well with the AI for Good theme of this global summit. So we're going to ask how technology can help us, not how it can dominate us or be better than us. We'd encourage you to ask questions and hope that our presentation enthuses you to think about the human potential of AI. So I'll hand over now to my colleague in London, Professor Mark D'Inverno from Goldsmiths College. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I'm afraid my background, I don't know what's wrong with my background. I can't get it to work, so forgive me. I'm really proud to be part of the collaboration with Monash. John and I go a long way back for 20 years now, and it's that sensitivity really about being an artist and working in artificial intelligence. It's really important that AI isn't left in the hands of AI researchers alone, that we bring in the humanities, social sciences, and the sense of what it is to be a creative practitioner. So that's been a critical part of the philosophy at Goldsmiths. We're a hugely interdisciplinary university. You would know about some of our alumni, like Steve McQueen, the director, Damien Hirst. So we've been right at the centre of London's and the world's creative industries. And so we profoundly think about the ethics and the creative potential of technology when it's used in the right way. So we're very proud of our relationship with Monash, and we're very proud to be part of AI for Good here this morning. And I'll try and adjust my background. Apologies. Back to Christian, I think.
So with no further ado, John, I think we are ready for the show of the first live performance. Is that right?
Yeah, we're going to show you some collaborate. We're first going to explain a little bit about what improvisation is and give you a lot of musical examples to start thinking about that. And then we'll move and start introducing AI into the improvisation, and finally finish with a complete human machine, another human in another country, in another side of the planet, improvisation live. So it should be very exciting.
Hello, my name is Mark D'Inverno. I'm part of the research group at Monash and Goldsmiths. I'm as well as a researcher, I'm a musician. And what I'm going to start by talking about today is working out what is improvisation. So here at my piano in my home, am I going to play something? And I'm really just going to improvise. We're interested in improvisation in our group. We're interested because we're musicians and artists, and we kind of want to understand what the role of AI is. But before we do that, what's happening in improvisation? What's going on? I mean, there's all kinds of things. So one of the things that I think I'm kind of hyper aware of how it sounds. So I'm listening all of the time to what's happening, and almost responding to what I'm doing. It's very hard to talk and do this at the same time. There's an intensity as well, I guess. There's a focus and a flow. I'm very aware of how things are sounding. I'm kind of aware of the unfolding musical journey. And I'm trying to connect in a kind of moment-to-moment way. Really focused, really aware, and almost kind of curious as well about what happens. There is no sense of anything being predetermined at all. Absolutely, my fingers or something is happening because of this focus, this curiosity, having played the piano for years, and it unfolds in a moment-by-moment way. I'll play something else and try and do something completely different. it's you understand it's quite difficult to do it out of a concert environment, but you know, you almost, what's happening? Why do people want to hear this? I think people are connected to each other through that intensity, through the moment to moment relationship with the music. And if you're in a live venue and someone's playing, really improvising, then it can be really exciting. You know, you can really be taken out of yourself, and you almost are setting up, you know, musical challenges. I just launched into that last piece and didn't really know where it was going and almost how it was going to sound right at the beginning. So that's a sense of improvisation, and we're going to explore in a second what is the role of AI in music improvisation. So having talked about what improvisation is, the next question is, how do musicians improvise together? How do they work together to improvise? And, you know, if I'm thinking about what improvisation is, there's a kind of set of constraints there. You know, when I was talking to you earlier, I tried to make it 30 seconds. I tried to make it a sense of what I was doing. I was constrained by the piano, by the acoustics of the room. And then when you're working with musicians, they provide new challenges, new constraints, and new opportunities to feed each other off. And sometimes you can do most extraordinary things by working together. And that moment, a kind of almost a eureka moment when things are unfolding in real time, can be really exciting when you're listening to live improvised music. But there are tricks. There are tricks about why we can do this. One of those tricks is something called the Real Book, which is essentially 500 of the most played songs in jazz. Here's an example. My Favourite Things, most fantastic tune from The Sound of Music. And John Coltrane made this really famous in the 50s and 60s. But it's got a chord sequence. It's in the key of E minor. It has a waltz beat, a 3/4 beat, 1 2 3 2 2 3, and the changes. There's chord changes. And it's all written out in a form with repeats, and it's really clear to the musician. So you've got, and then there's something else. So let me just show you, let me play the tune and let me improvise on the same just for 15 seconds. Here is the tune, and then I will improvise on that same chord sequence. Now I'm going to improvise. Whenever you play something, you always wish you'd done something slightly different, but the great thing about improvisation is when it's played and it's gone, and then you can move on. So I'm using this chord sequence. Now, what's happening, and when I'm playing with other musicians in jazz, is that typically someone is taking the lead. So I was soloing, I was improvising, and that would mean that the other musicians are trying to be responsive. They're trying to react musically in the moment to what I'm doing, and they're not quite sure where they're going. And we've got the drums typically, and the bass, and the whole range of textures and colors and ways of moving the music on moment by moment are available to us. But one thing that's really interesting in music is that you have a level of confidence in what the other musicians are going to do. You kind of know if they're going to break the rules. They're doing it with an understanding of the tradition of music, with the tradition of jazz. And this is the idea of kind of agency in music. So I'm leading, typically if I'm soloing, and the others are responding. And then bit by bit that might change, so that the bass player is soloing and I'm responding. But typically what happens in improvisation is that the humans are, you know, we're trying to exchange our agency and our autonomy, and we're pushing ideas or we're receiving ideas and making them work. And that's really important when we think about what it is to design artificial intelligence to support human improvisation. So the big question, and what we're here to kind of like want to talk to you about, is what is the role of artificial intelligence in improvisation and in the arts more generally as well? And there's basically two schools of thought. One is that we create the machines that can make art or improvise or write a poem on their own. And it's something that in research between Monash and Goldsmiths, we called heroic artificial agency. So it's the idea that the machine sits there and is creative on its own. And then there's the other type of artificial intelligence, which we call collaborative AI, where the system is there to try to stimulate, to challenge, and to provoke my human creativity. Now, part of this is where it gets really interesting. And one of the things that we're really keen to talk about today is why AI should not just be left to computer scientists or to computer science or AI as a discipline. It needs the arts. It needs an understanding of the humanities. It needs an understanding of social science if we're going to work out where do we want AI as a place in the world. And as a musician, where do I want AI? And part of the problem is this word creativity. And the more that you look at the history, the etymology, the philosophy, the psychology of this word, the more you recognize why people have different ideas about what this word means. To some, in a kind of modern version, creativity is this incredible power in the mind to produce novelty. But a more traditional version of creativity, one which I'm much happier to talk about and I subscribe to, it's a human condition. It's a human condition. It's about being a human being, an embodied human being with our thoughts and our emotions and our experiences and our biology and our sociology, and an understanding of the tradition of humans making music and making work for each other. And here's why it's important. If you think of creativity as in disembodied power in the mind, then of course you can make machines to make, poems or music or art. It makes sense if you use that definition of creativity. But if you use a more embodied, a more experiential view of what creativity is, then the idea of the machine making music seems an anathema to us. Why would I ever want to listen to something made by a machine on its own? Part of the joy of playing music, because I can relate my experience of being a human with other human beings. It connects us. It is the process of a human undertaking music, which is what connects us to the music that it's being performed. So that's really key to us, is that we do not see artificial intelligence as replacing human creativity. We think it makes little sense. What we are interested in, and which we're going to explore next, is the idea of machines which can stimulate, provoke, democratize, excite different kinds of human creativity in musicians like me. Okay, so we've switched to the electric piano, and that's because the electric piano can send out very precise information about the length of notes, about the volume of notes, about the pitch of notes, and even if I'm playing a huge number of notes, actually all of that information is digitally captured, if you like, by the machine. If I'm playing the real piano, which is an acoustic instrument, to get that information is extremely hard, in fact impossible, for some of the things that I sometimes play. So I'm going to improvise again, and now we're going to explore improvising with technology. But I first just want to remind what improvisation is. I'm trying to make something sound good, sound musical, sound intended. I'm kind of curious about what's happening. I'm kind of trying to focus, and I'm still trying to make it sound as good as I possibly can. So I want you to bear that in mind when I'm working the technology. I'm trying my best to create a musical performance, and let's see how that unfolds now. Hi Matthew, so why don't you say hello and introduce yourself and the system that you built?
Yeah, hello. So my name's Matthew Yi-King, and I'm an AI researcher and a musician.
Yeah.
And my interest in AI is really how I can use it to enhance the experience of musicians and how to create AI systems which allow people to explore new spaces of musical possibilities that they might not have explored before. And I've done a lot of work around sound synthesis, so looking at timbral spaces, and in the systems that we're going to see today, we're also looking at note spaces, if you like, or symbolic space of music.
And do you want to say something about the system, Matthew, perhaps some of the settings that are on the system?
Yeah, so the system has a few different modes,
right.
and we sort of deliberately created these to enable us to sort of demonstrate how
AI could
different
work.
levels of AI can work, right? So yeah, so one of the settings we call parrot, because it simply repeats back whatever you play, right? So that's not really AI. It's totally. I mean.
Yeah. So I get that. So in the first performance that I gave, the system was simply playing back at about a second later what I was doing. But yet, even though I knew it had no autonomy, so we talked, didn't we, before about when you improvise, someone is usually leading and someone's always following. Well, you build a system here that's always following. It doesn't have any decision making. It's completely serving or just repeating.
Yeah,
what I'm doing.
So it has absolutely no autonomy. It just it just does whatever you do. So that's the first system, and the second system is kind of the opposite. Except it has complete autonomy. It does exactly what it wants, but unfortunately we didn't endow it with any kind of brain or intelligence whatsoever. So it just generates random notes. It's surprising when a good musician like yourself is kind of faced with this pattern that appears to be random. You're able to kind of like move around in that space, sort of weave it into something that maybe makes sense to an audience.
Yeah, I mean, so I have to say, when I was working with the parrot, it was actually it was surprising to me, even very simple like that, just a little echo machine. You actually can still build performances which you couldn't do on your own, and it takes you to new places. It was sort of challenging me. But it was much more of a challenge when this entirely autonomous system that wasn't listening. In fact, I played with musicians that don't listen and don't care about the sound of the band. But yeah, for about a minute or 2 minutes, I think I was struggling, but the only way I could do it was to treat your system as a musician. So even though I don't believe that I want to think about the system as being autonomously creative, I was really happy to think about your system as being a musician with me, in that performance.
So you took it on board, and you ultimately tried to create something that people might enjoy.
Yes,
by kind of just dealing with its bizarre note patterns and like trying to weave around them. what about the third system? So the third system is similar in that it has complete autonomy about which notes it plays to some extent, but the energy with which it can play is based on you. So the more notes you play, the more energy it gets, and that allows it to play notes. But it doesn't listen to you apart from counting how many notes you're playing.
Right. So so what we started with is the agent that has no autonomy. So this is kind of the parrot, and then we had something which didn't listen and had kind of almost entire autonomy, but you wouldn't call it very musical because it wasn't listening.
Yeah.
But now you're giving it the simplest kind of listening, so that it's keying on the energy or the number of notes that you said.
Yeah.
And actually, even that very simple technique, it felt like a little bit more of a collaboration, if you like. So the first one I was entirely leading, so it was just me being played back, so I had total control.
Yeah.
The second one I had no control, but then the third one you gave me a little bit of control, and I could do a lot more with that.
So you could provide some shape, and then so combined with the ability to turn a random pattern into something meaningful by playing correct notes, you could also shape it and get it to stop or speed up or slow down.
I mean, what the challenge is, of course, is that whilst we can make it sort of interesting on a talk like this for a minute or two, you know, how on earth would we build an AI that could sustain our attention perhaps for a few more minutes? And I know you've tried to do that with the last version of the system, if you like.
Yeah, so the most complicated system is building a statistical model of what you're playing. So it's listening very carefully to what you're playing, and it's building a statistical model of that, which is a way of saying, okay, what kind of patterns of notes does he play? Which note commonly comes after which other note? Or even, you know, and it picks up chords, it knows which chords you're playing, and it can store chord sequences. But it's quite a simple model still, but it is very much based on what you play, but then it can then play that back from that model, similar patterns to the ones you were playing. But as the piece develops, it learns more and more in real time about what you're playing, and is able to dig from that whole vocabulary that you've given it over the whole performance. So by the end, it's got quite a rich model of how you play, and it can pull out things which might be quite surprising to you.
Yes.
So in a way, at the beginning, it's a bit parroty because it only has a little bit of information about what you do. But over time, it becomes much richer and can pull out things you did at the beginning or things that you did in the middle and so on.
So this is a really strong way to approach building AI systems, is that actually you're kind of recording elements of me. You're capturing elements of my model, my style, and then using kind of AI techniques to play that back. So am I almost playing with an AI version of myself in some sense? Am I? Is that what's happening, Matt?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So it's a sort of phantom Mark Inverno that it's building. Yeah.
My name is Alonil Saar. And these are the Airsticks.
So, Alon, tell us about the Airsticks. What are they and how do they work?
Well, they're not just, but they are just gaming controls, virtual reality ones that are off the market, and they allow me to basically play sounds in air, like this. My background is as a drummer, so I don't usually deal with pitch, I deal more with timbre, so I can move my hands in different directions, angles, positions, and get different timbre as well. So what's really interesting about this project is that I'm not controlling any of the pitch when I play with Mark. I'm just going to get a feed of the AI pitch, and then I'll control the timbre moving around, and I won't need to think about striking and being percussive in any way. I kind of feed into that slot in the music where I control the timbre. And one thing that you get from this instrument is that you can actually hold the sounds for as long as you want, which for me as a percussionist is really exciting. You don't have to keep putting energy into the instrument, so you can decide how long each note is. And you can pan it left and right. I don't know if you can hear it in your headphones. You can filter it. Put effects on it. And I find those gestures a bit more like playing brushes on an acoustic drum kit, but in 3 dimensions. And that lends itself really well to working with the AI system because I can just really focus on moving and
Right, so we're going to try something that we've really never tried before. We only came up with this idea about a week or 2 ago. We haven't really rehearsed this, but what we're going to try now is I'm going to try to improvise with the AI and with one of our colleagues at Monash, with Alon at Monash. We don't really know how this is going to go, but I think before we start, and I wanted to say we don't really know how it's going to go, but we're trying something, you know, really new, really quite different. So Matthew, exactly what's going to happen now?
Okay, so Mark is going to play the piano, and it's going to generate a load of notes.
From your system?
The piano notes feed into the AI.
Yep.
The AI then models what you're playing and then generates something similar or inspired by you, transmits that to Alon
in
Australia, who then receives that and is able to control what it's sending him with his Airstick hardware. And so he'll be improvising with a sort of phantom version of Mark, which we transmitted from the UK to Australia.
And remember, we've got a bit of a delay of about half a second, 1 second as well, haven't we? But this intermediary helps us sort of play in some sense more together than is possible without it.
Yeah, and it's really sort of working around that idea of exploring creative spaces that we may not have been able to get to without the AI. So the AI allows us to sort of free up the time to some extent and to give Alon something which he can explore, which is inspired by what you're playing.
Yes.
So it's really a different type of interaction than what we'd be able to do if, let's say, you just sent your piano straight to Alon and he sent his stuff straight back. It just gives us a whole other space to explore.
Great. Well, we're going to see how it goes now. So thank you very much. Fantastic. I like that the best.
Wow, what a fantastic showcase of collaboration and creativity. I'm really excited to have the possibility now to introduce to you all the collaborators of the film and the project. Apart from Mark Dinverno and John McCormack, who you met already, we have with us today also Alon Ilsa. You've just saw him in the video with the Airsticks instrument, an Australian-based drummer, composer, and instrument designer, as well as researcher at SensorLab in Monash. Welcome, Alon, and thank you so much for inspiring us all with this amazing work. It's been fantastic to watch. Apart from Alon, we also have with us Matthew Yuking. You've seen him as the developer of the AI system sitting next to Mark at the piano. Matthew is an electronic musician and researcher at Goldsmiths University in London. He created many musical AI systems already that have performed alongside human musicians at BBC, National Radio, and international venues. Matthew, really happy to have us with you, have you with us today. We also have Maria Teresa Lano. Maria Teresa is lecturer of creative AI at the Faculty of IT and Department of Human-Centered Computing at SensorLab in Monash. She has a PhD in computing, and her focus is computational creativity and explainable AI, and what this means in connection to the project. We're very, very excited to explore in just a minute. And yeah, Mark and John, it would be wonderful if you could also share your screens and microphones. What a fantastic collaboration. I would love to start with jumping right back into where we left off with the video. Alon and Mark, how was the experience of improvising together and collaborating together over, I guess, a distance of over 10,000 miles separation, only connected by an artificial intelligence? Could you have chosen a more a more challenging endeavor than this? I can't imagine.
I can go first, Mark. Yeah, look, it kind of just, particularly now with the climate of online music, the way we need to use music online, it's really relevant to try to shake up the way that we interact with each other online with music, because with COVID, as a musician myself, there's just no gigs, there's no performing in front of people, and there's often no interacting with other people, other musicians. So this idea of playing over Zoom, and as Mark says in the video, to kind of deal with the delay that we have and insert a phantom AI kind of is very exciting for us, because then we have to kind of deal with this other element that we can't hear until it's too late, which is what's very exciting about it. And I don't know whether, I see there's questions to maybe explain a little bit more about the system and how we were interacting. But to clarify, Mark's playing a MIDI piano. That MIDI piano generates a MIDI score in real time that goes to the algorithm that models new MIDI notes that get sent out to the other side of the world, that I then, if I stand back, they just sound like a vibraphone, kind of. And I can move in and out and generate different timbres, and also capture little moments in time, little loops, little bits of activity, and hold on to them and then release them again. And that's why we really like this idea that it was a phantom, because it's almost like it was in the space in front of me in Melbourne, getting generated from the other side of the world from Mark. And it's also worth saying, I've never played with Mark. I had no idea
how good he was, but I also had no idea where he would go, how he would react. So that was, truly inspiring, especially in these times.
So have you actually ever met in person before? Could you feel each other out? I can't imagine how difficult it must be if you haven't even met in person before.
Yeah, it's an interesting part, but we've only met on Zoom on Wednesdays, my evening and his morning. So we've never even been in the same time zone. So yeah.
Did any of you have experiences before with live improvisation or playing together now on Zoom with other musicians, like apart from the help, like without the help of an artificial intelligence? Is that something you try to do or seen others doing? Or
I could take that one. So I'm involved in a research project called Mimic, and in that project we developed a sort of a browser-based music environment for coding music, live coding, which is another area of kind of computer music research. And in that we actually performed in a network music festival. So we had 3 of us all editing the same file at the same time, which was generating music, which was pretty hairy. But it was a real buzz, and we kind of had a Zoom session going, so people could see what we were saying to each other while we were playing, saying, "Oh no, you've messed up my bit," or whatever. So it was a completely different modality than being in the same room, and it's really fascinating.
Matthew, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the system as such. Like, what are the challenges that, apart from, I guess, the augmentation of the creativity part and allowing for more improvisation between musicians, I guess you have to deal and tackle a lot of mundane challenges, time delay and all the MIDI signals and all that. Like, what is it, or what was it that you had to wrap your head around and work with?
Yeah. Well, these days, there's so much great sort of software libraries out there that you can knock stuff together fairly quickly if you know how to plumb things together. So that was quite good, and we found a really good tool that let us do a sort of remote MIDI connection, so we could send the MIDI fairly easily. And then it was really just making the tool itself, that the system itself, very reliable. Someone's asked in the Q&A if we're going to put that up. Yes, sure, we're going to open source that tool, the system, so people can play with it themselves. It's just a MIDI. It works with MIDI, so you can plug anything into it. So then the core algorithm, I guess that was kind of tricky, but it's one I've worked on for a while. It's kind of an old-fashioned AI algorithm, because there's no need for anything deeper. I've worked with deep learning and all that in other types of systems, but in this one we actually use something called a variable Markov model, or a hierarchical Markov model, depending who you speak to model the underlying thing. And you can get pretty far with these kind of models, and what's nice about them is they're very easy to understand. And so one part of our work is that we want to progress to a point where we can bolt on a sort of explainable layer onto these things, so it's possible to understand what's going on inside the AI brain, as it were, when it's performing, so that the musician maybe gets a better insight into how to interact with it. And that's something I know Teresa's really interested in that kind of explainability layer. And so I think that's really our next big challenge is okay, we've built the system, it generates interesting stuff, it's fun to play with, it works over 10,000 miles or whatever, but we'd really like to be able to have more of an understanding of what it's doing, so that people can interact with it in a more interesting way. I'd say that's the big challenge for us next.
I can only imagine that this must be a huge challenge to try to find out what the system is actually doing. I mean, Alon and Mark, you've done an amazing job at just taking it on and playing it, feeling it out, and playing around with it with fantastic results. But Teresa, is there? I mean, that's as Matthew said, that's your big topic. What other possibilities do we have of understanding such a system and opening it and democratizing it possibly even further? Making it possible for other musicians to use and understand it.
Yeah, that's something that we are working on. Actually, we are exploring that, because creativity is this collaborative, dynamic, thing that goes on between different, agents in the collaboration. So we are really, looking at how to enable communication in this kind of performances, in this kind of settings in which there is human-machine collaboration, and this is really an intrinsic part, of fruitful collaborations, and this is something that we want to explore further, in the improvisation. And this is something that I remember after the performance between Alon and Mark, that Alon said that he couldn't keep his eyes from Mark, because he needed, that physicality, even though he was working with this phantom version of Mark, but he needed the physicality because there were some cues, there are unspoken cues, there are things that, goes on that needs this kind of communication. And that's what we are trying to understand, what kind of communication can we enable within the system and within people, with the musicians, so that this kind of, communication can happen, this kind of connection in some way. We can connect better the musician with the system.
And do you have examples for us that to understand that a little bit? So you stress the visual element of allowing connections between the people. What routes are you exploring there in particular?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to look, for instance, when there is an improvisation, one thing that improvisers do is they look at each other, they kind of see the body language of the person to see how confident they are, and this is the kind of thing of factors, that we're exploring. How can we enable the system to communicate in some way the confidence that the system is feeling from the musician, the human musician, and how confident the system itself is feeling in what is hearing. Like maybe, it doesn't have notes to play at some moment, and that happens, for instance, with Matthew's system, that sometimes, it's just, waiting for inspiration in some way. So this kind of things is the kind of things that we are trying to understand how and what are those kind of things that we need to show.
Very, very interesting. Mark, you, I asked you in the very beginning, but you didn't get the chance to share your view on this fantastic improvisation. How was it for you as a pianist to, work with somebody on the other side of the planet and being mediated by an artificial intelligence? I would very much love to hear about this.
Well, Christian, I mean, a few things, and I'll limit my answers. I mean, there are so many things to say, but that was the first time I saw the video because I couldn't download it before. And to see Alon working with his Airsticks, I just thought, my God, that's incredible. This wonderful musician. So Alon, heads up. I mean, a thumbs up. That was fantastic to see you do what you normally do. But I had a trust in Alon because of the way we were talking about music, where we were talking about AI and music. So we talked about that as well. So I have a trust in Alon as a musician just from the conversations we were having, without knowing that he's a performer. I doubt he looked me up to see if I could play the piano. And I have a trust in this research group, and I have a trust in the systems that Matthew can produce. What was amazing about, I think, that clip when I was watching it, and I really was watching it for the first time, was as despite how good Matthew's system is, and if I worked with it more, I would create a performance for 2 or 3 minutes. It's never the same as playing with another human being, because again, that lived experience, that ability to connect, was kind of really transformed it, and it enabled us to do things we could not do. There is no way that Alon and I could really work without the AI, because we would always recognize that we were out by half a second. But it both frees us up the space of creative possibility, but there's also that, why I think AI is interesting is because every artist, and there was a fantastic comment from one of my students, thank you so much. I mean, I was literally embarrassed to read that, but our life is a moment-to-moment lived experience. So what was great watching that with Alon is we were both even more focused on trying to do something in that moment than perhaps we would have been in other scenarios where sometimes you can freeform. So moment-by-moment awareness and confidence that we all need as artists and musicians, and just to live on a day-by-day, moment-by-moment way. So a few thoughts kind of randomly there, Christian.
Wonderful. Yeah, to me, it was really striking also to hear you dwell a bit on your view of creativity, right? And I mean, we briefly discussed it in the introduction as well already. I guess you have these two general notions and directions of where AI or computers can help us with in terms of our creative endeavors. You have on one hand, more computers getting creative on your own right. I guess Mark, you mentioned that as heroic AI, if that's right. I think that's a term that John comes a lot of also from your mutual endeavors, right? And then you juxtapose that with a collaborative AI that would more augment our human creativity. And I found that a very, very interesting topic, saying like, okay, computers may be creative, they could produce creative outputs, but what's the purpose and what's the meaning if, we just can't share it as a lived experience, no embodiment, no connection to it. John, Mark, could you explain on that a little bit further? It's a very interesting topic on this.
Yeah, thanks. It's kind of a crucial differentiation, I think, because the history of AI is largely the kind of history of human belittlement. So if you think about what is commonly thought of as being the big breakthrough moments in AI, often it involves game playing, for instance, where the best human in the world is beaten by an AI. So, we kind of have this fear about being beaten. But in music, it's so different. In creativity, it's so different. And that's why, there are some very fundamental issues about creativity that makes it, in some sense, impossible for a machine to be creative in the same way that humans are creative. Even if they're very good at making music or very good at making compositions, that doesn't necessarily make them creative in the way that humans are creative. So, our research, and I think at this point in time, there's no doubt that AI is getting better and better and better, but the question of whether it will ever reach a level where we have autonomous machines making music that people actually want to listen to in the way that we experience the humanity of being a musician or being a listener in a musical environment, I think is questionable. So our research is very much focused on how can we empower people to be more creative? How can we expand the possibilities as a creative person, irrespective of whether you're a professional or just somebody who's sitting at home, banging some sticks on a table or whatever? How can you have your creativity expanded and enhanced and supported rather than just beating the best human at something that doesn't need to be beaten? It doesn't need to be bettered, because that's not really the purpose of music. It's not a competition.
And if I could just follow up on John, I mean, that's partly why Monash and Goldsmiths have worked so well and so closely together, is this view about kind of you start with the human and then work out what technology can do to support the human. But it's really important in terms of understanding interdisciplinary research. John and I have worked together a long time, but I work with a historian and philosopher called Arthur Still. And if you look at the history of the word creativity, that kind of before about 1950s, creativity meant a kind of experience, a lived experience. There was John Dewey talking about art as experience. But then recently, since the war, creativity has been hijacked to mean something which is a kind of disembodied power in the mind to produce novelty. And so that's why we have to be so careful when we're thinking about the role of technology to look at the use of words, the use of terminology, but to bring in all of the disciplines to understand the place and the way that we want technology to serve our society, which is why, again, we're so pleased to be here with AI for Good, because that's kind of, looking at the ethical aspects of how technology is employed in our lives. To what degree do we want AI to take over what it is that we do now is something that all of us should have a say in.
Teresa, was it that you...
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Mark and John were saying, and that's something important as well, is that with creativity, the output is not only the most important thing. You know, there is also the creative process and all that is surrounds that, and that's something that it takes a lot of different factors into account, and it's something that is in many cases intrinsic to humans. You know how it is done. So I just wanted to say that is something that I believe, you know, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to just, you know, implement in an artificial world.
What I found really outstanding and just utterly impressing when reading your backgrounds and preparing a bit for the session is, you know, the way how all of you individually embrace creativity in your lives, and how, you know, multifaceted it is that you express it all in multiple ways of being, you know, outstanding musicians and creative artists at the same time with technology developers. So it is in that sense really that not astounding that you bring forward such an approach of the collaborative AI and the augmentative possibilities of technology. It's also that it's based on a lot of human connection, I feel, right? This whole collaboration. Mark and John, you've written a world-renowned book on AI and creativity, on computers and creativity together. You say you go way long back. Tell us a little bit about the human element of this collaboration. How did it all start that you got to collaborate together across the continents?
Well, it's a very long story, but to give you the short version, I guess we both have a mutual interest in, you know, we're both technically trained, so we both, you know, studied computer science, and we love computer science, we love programming and algorithms and all those kinds of things, but we're also creative people. And when you meet someone who is both, you know, technically savvy and creative, it's it's always exciting for me, because you don't meet many people with skills in both disciplines. And so, you know, the collaboration with Mark, as you mentioned, has been going on for a long time. And I think it's because we both share a common sensibility about what it means to be creative. And for us, I think that always comes first. We always think about, why would artists want to use this technology? Why would musicians or artists want to use this technology? Not just, can we make something that looks like art, or that sounds a bit like music. And so, you know, it's kind of common sense really to study something to the degree where you become proficient at it. You need to understand that field, and you need to have that lived experience of being a creative practitioner. So I think that's the connection. And, you know, but we still really believe in technology as a way of empowering people and being able to, you know, open up a whole lot of creative possibilities that have never been possible in the history of you know, human creative practice previously. So it's very exciting in terms of what's potentially possible. But there are traps. There are you know, a whole lot of different approaches, and I think the approach that we really favour is one that thinks about the musician, the artist first, and says, well, what is it that they actually want?
Thank you very much, John. With that, I would love to encourage again questions from the audience. If you would love to have anything answered, or something that we can discuss in the panel, please submit your questions or comments or feedback to the chat. I know that all the collaborators and the project is dearly welcoming feedback from you as well. I guess there's further hopes and developments that are being planned now. So I guess it's important to know, you know, what we're thinking of it. With that being said, yeah, Mark, please.
I just wanted to point out, there's a lovely phrase from Condane that I feel sorry for the AI. It has quite a task to match human creativity. That's kind of where I think most of us are as well. Why you know, it's the wrong approach really to think about, can machines be creative? We have a kind of this huge sociological, biological evolution and the sense of what it is to be human, going back, to the time of the Big Bang almost. It's there in our atoms. So it's absolutely a crazy thing to suggest that actually, why would we want AIs to take over something which makes us uniquely human? So again, this idea of starting with who we are as both, I mean, all of us are, you spoke, Christian, we are all artists, we all make things, whether it's gardening or cooking or, there's nothing, we have this great idea that playing the piano is somehow wonderful, but, you can do this with any aspect of what you do in life. We are all scientists in the sense that we want to understand the nature of the world, and we're all teachers in the sense that we try to help each other understand the nature of the world. So even though researchers working in this area, everybody is part artist, part scientist, and part teacher. And I think that, a technology will help us in any of those three domains. And I think that's exactly how we should approach the design and implementation of technologies in our cultures. But I just love the phrase, Christian, I feel sorry for AI. We're going to use that in a book or a paper. I think it's fantastic. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. Yeah, I guess what a fantastic call also to arms, and what a fantastic call for every one of us to, I guess, not shy away from getting more creative, getting our hands dirty, and embracing curiosity and creativity wherever we find it and looking for expression. I know also from our work here at State Studio that a lot of young people are nowadays not sure anymore, what is the right career path, and in this present situation where everything is very much centered around specialization and digging really deep into disciplines, while they can't really decide between oftentimes their artistic side and their scientific side. Does any one of you have any good advice to share for people wanting that are in that situation and can't really decide between the two sides and want to venture in a direction that you obviously succeeded so fantastically?
Maybe I can start, because my background is really into two very different disciplines. So I started off studying computer science and applied mathematics, and I didn't really like it. I felt it was interesting, but it didn't seem like the right career path for me. I always wanted to be a filmmaker. So then I studied film and cinema and animation. So I went on and did a filmmaking course. And just at the time that I was studying was the sort of dawn of the age where computers started taking over cinematography and filmmaking and special effects and all those kinds of things. And suddenly there was this amazing array of possibilities that had never been possible before when you start combining visual imagery with synthesized computer imagery. So I think always these opportunities come when you least expect them, and to say that you need to be specialized is certainly good and true, but I think having skills that often at one point in time appear to be quite the opposite of what you would expect to work together can suddenly, in a very short space of time, become something that's absolutely vital and essential. The way that technology kind of pushes things around. So I think the key thing for me has always been do stuff that you enjoy, do stuff that really inspires you and motivates you. I mean, it's a common kind of claim, I guess, but I think it's still very true. If you're not inspired by what you're doing, then it's much more difficult to really embrace it.
I've got a bit of a comment about that as well. I think with the students I work with, I think they often don't realise that they're bringing a whole load of expertise about something which they can apply to a technical domain. And so it's about, so what John was saying about inspiration. So I think we would call it sort of, specialist domain knowledge. So if you're a musician, you've got a whole bunch of knowledge locked up there, which if you start investigating AI, for example, you'll find that you can get through ideas and break through concepts around, especially around music and how it should work, much more easily than a straightforward AI researcher who hasn't really done music can do. And so that's my observation. So an example is different from a different domain, but I had a student who was interested in building an AI that could play a video game. And when he was building that, because he was an expert at playing that game, he knew what the AI should do, and he knew when it was successful and when it wasn't. So I think if there's something that you're really interested in, like cooking, music, whatever it is, if you want to find something to do AI on, use your domain expertise, and then in a way that will drive you to do the right thing. I mean, with the sort of the idea of music and not wanting to replace musicians with AIs. Well, yeah, I mean, when I started experimenting with AI like 20 years ago and trying to make sounds with it and stuff like that, I'd never wanted to replace myself because I was having a great time making sounds. Why would I want to have a completely autonomous system that does all this fun stuff that I'm enjoying doing? So if you come from a position of domain knowledge or passion about something, that you just wouldn't, I don't know why you'd go down the path of replacing yourself.
Alon, Teresa, do you want to chip in on that topic, or you feel everything's?
Yeah, well, I would like to say actually I'm the only non-musician in the bunch. So, but I also wanted to say, to people who precisely don't have the background like myself, is something that you can also develop. Don't feel that you need to have this background in music or in any specific kind of art or something like that. I mean, I got fascinated by this, and I did my PhD on formal methods, so it's a very different thing that I'm coming from. But then I started seeing, how this was interdisciplinary research where you have to, as Mark said before, you need to take into account the social sciences, humanities. It's so fascinating, and it's something that you can really dive into, I would say, and it's something that you can develop as well. And this is something also very, very much part of SensiLab, I would say, that is research by practice. So by doing it, by making it, by practicing it, you can really, get to know it, get to, have that experience. So I would just say that don't feel that you need to have this background to be able to dive into this.
I guess what we're all really excited about and interested in as well is the question of, where do you want to take this project next? And okay, I just see some questions from the chat coming up now. So before you get the chance to tell us about the future, let's try to answer some questions from the chat. Martin is asking, the sticks are a very interesting interface. Could you explain a bit more how they are related to AI? Alon, I guess that one's for you.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because they're not really related to AI in a major sense, in the sense that I developed them to control as much of this electronic music as I possibly could. I was fed up with drum pads and so forth that would only allow me to trigger a sound and that's it. So I wanted to develop something that could get my body involved and control everything, because I'm a drummer who plays an acoustic instrument where I know exactly what happens when I play it. I get the response that I want. And it's only through really joining SensiLab and talking philosophically with this group particularly, that I started realizing what AI could bring to this exploration of space. And I think there's a lot to bring AI for an instrument that has no legacy, if that makes sense. You sit at a piano, you play, you as a non-musician sit at a piano and kind of expect that you should be able to do something that sounds like Bach or like the Beatles. But when you pick up the Airsticks and when I give it to other people to play, there's no expectation. There's nothing that is right or wrong way of playing this instrument. So I think that's where the role of AI can fit in really comfortably. And that leads to the question you asked me before of where this project is going. And where this project is going is using gesture recognition, more intuitive things that we use in our body, not just playing a piano, to generate the AI musician's response to the human musician. So you can just move around and it will respond to you through sound that's not necessarily analyzing the harmonic content or the melodic content. It's just analyzing your movement and the way it's manipulating sound. So yeah, that kind of ties in that thread. But I agree, Martin, we're only touching the surface of the Airsticks being an AI instrument.
There's a wonderful question from Catherine. Also in that direction, Catherine is asking, I want to inspire my son to play electronic keyboard, but he does not show patience to follow the notes. Okay, I know that problem. So he wants to play like freestyle. How could possibly what you've been doing help to cultivate his interests and get better at playing keyboard and piano? Could the AI assist with that?
I think it's a lovely question, and I think the answer is we would like to try to make this possible. I think this idea about how you get an excitement from this moment-to-moment interaction with music or any kind of creative expression is where we think technology is helping. And that we talked about it all the time. That idea that with technology, it's kind of a bit more out of your comfort zone, so you have to focus even more. So I can imagine a situation where we could build something like the system that Matthew's developed, and that you get immediate responses, and that it motivates you to have a sense of curiosity and play and sense of the moment. And so you don't feel that you're alone. You feel like you're working with someone that you can anthropomorphize for the sake of a session and get some sort of feedback, and it would help develop curiosity and a sense of the notes. So yes, I think the opportunities for the technologies in AI supporting the development of our learning as creative individuals is really strong, and I think we would be very interested. So yes, and Matthew said he will make it available to you, so try it, write to us, tell us how you get on. We'd love to hear.
Fantastic. If that's not a great opportunity and news for everyone, I don't know. It's soon that we have to wrap up already. I think we have one further surprise for you in Stash, right? We have another recording of a performance, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know how you feel, but having seen the first one, it was only like a teaser to me, and if I hear that there's another one, I think we all can't miss the opportunity. So thank you very much for sharing this amazing project with us and sharing your insights and sharing your creativity and your wonderful views on collaborative collaborations with technology and how AI can augment our creativity. I think we all learned a lot from that, and we can all take a lot of insights home. We'll even learn that we have soon the possibility to play around with your system and perhaps become, music improvisers ourselves with the help of artificial intelligence. But perhaps for the time being, we still learn from the professionals and watch the masters at play. So with that being said, let's jump into the final performance.
Well, such a fantastic piece of music. We hope that you enjoyed it. And as we see, there is no limits of human creativity, and AI can only enhance it further. So I would like to thank once again Christian, Mark, John, Teresa, Alan, and Matthew for your insights. And of course, the Monash Data Features Institute, Goldsmiths, and State for helping us putting this session together. For those who are interested in the topic, please check out our AI for Good Artistic Intelligence podcast hosted by the Changing the Story and State. You can see now the link in the chat. And last but not least, we invite you to join us next week for another AI for Good webinar on ethical AI for Good. How can your government achieve it? Organized in partnership with Capgemini, to be held next Thursday on 29th of October. And you can see all the information right now in the chat, and we invite you to register on our website. So I would like to thank, of course, all our partners, sponsors, and our co-convener Switzerland for your continuing support. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you next week.
Rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector. Rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector.